Hello! Welcome to the February edition of the 4th grade Mathematics Parent Video Newsletter. In this video, we will share a strategy that supports your students' understanding of comparing fractions in Unit 4. Today, I am going to walk you through 3 different strategies that your student could use to compare fractions. I'm going to start with explaining how a student could use a common denominator to compare fractions. Let's compare 2/6 and 5/8. For this strategy, we could find the common denominator 2 ways. We could list the multiples of each denominator. Here we see they have the multiple 24 in common. Or we could also multiply the denominators to find the common denominator of 48. Either of these denominators would work to create our equivalent fractions. For today, we are going to use the common denominator of 24. I have set up my fractions to show that I want to convert each of them into equivalent fractions with a denominator of 24. Now I ask myself, what number do I multiply my denominator of 6 by to get 24? 4. 6 times 4 equals 24. When we are creating an equivalent fraction, whatever we multiply the denominator by, we multiply that same number by the numerator. So 2 times 4 equals 8. Notice we multiplied by 4/4, which is equivalent to 1 whole. When we multiply any number by 1, we get the same number. Although the numbers in the fraction changed, the amount it represents is still the same. That is why we call it equivalent. Now let's do the same to 5/8. What do I multiply my denominator of 8 by to get 24? 3. 8 times 3 is 24. Remember, whatever we multiply the denominator by, we multiply that same number by the numerator. So 5 times 3 equals 15. I can now use my 2 equivalent fractions to compare my original fractions. Since 8 24ths has less 24ths than 15 24ths, I can determine that 2/6 is less than 5/8. Another strategy you could use to compare fractions is to use common numerators. Let's compare 2/6 and 5/8 again. For this strategy, we could find the common numerator 2 ways. We could list the multiples of each numerator. Here we see they have the multiple 10 in common. Or we could multiply the numerators to find the common numerator of 10. For this problem, both common numerators ended up being the same, 10. Here are my fractions set up to show that I want to convert each of them into equivalent fractions with a numerator of 10. Now I ask myself, what number do I multiply my numerator of 2 by to get 10? 5. 2 times 5 equals 10. When we are creating an equivalent fraction, whatever we multiply the numerator by, we multiply that same number by the denominator. So 6 times 5 is 30. Notice we multiplied by 5/5, which is equivalent to 1. Remember, when we multiply any number by 1, we get the same number. Although the numbers in the fraction changed, the amount it represents is still the same. This is why we call it equivalent. Now let's do the same to 5/8. What do I multiply my numerator 5 by to get 10? 2. 5 times 2 is 10. Remember, whatever we multiply the numerator by, we multiply that same number by the denominator. So 8 times 2 is 16. I can now use my two equivalent fractions to compare my original fractions. I see I have 10 30ths and 10 16ths. I know that 30ths are smaller pieces than 16ths. So having 10 30ths is less than having 10 16ths. Knowing this, I can determine that 2/6 is less than 5/8. The last strategy we could use to compare fractions is to use a benchmark fraction. Let's compare 2/6 and 5/8 one more time. Our most common benchmarks are 0, 1/2, and 1. For this strategy, we are going to use the benchmark of 1/2. Using our benchmark, we can compare based on whether our fraction is less than or greater than 1/2. Here are my fractions set up to compare them to 1/2. Fractions equivalent to 1/2 are fractions we talk about often. I know that 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6. And I know that 2/6 is less than 3/6. I also know that 1/2 is equivalent to 4/8. And I know that 5/8 is greater than 4/8. Since 2/6 is less than 1/2 and 5/8 is greater than 1/2, I can say that 2/6 is less than 5/8. We show our students all three of these strategies, and they then have the option to use the strategy that works best for them when comparing fractions. Thank you for watching today's video on comparing fractions. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and check back for more videos.